it's a challenging thing to deal with because there's all these things that you are frankly not prepared for. And a lot of people don't know what they're getting into with the job, because it's at the end of the day, it's very much it's not about you anymore. It's about like making sure that other people get the result.
The function of leadership is to produce more leaders, not more followers. Welcome to the Paid Forward Society, where we believe that leadership is a continuous learning journey and where knowledge is passed on to the next generation of leaders. I'm Roman Jordan. I've been learning and practicing management of global teams for about 10 years. In this podcast, we explore the many facets of leadership as we talk to inspiring managers, entrepreneurs, coaches, veterans, and athletes who empower their teams and deliver results. Together, we discover the keys to success through empathy, purpose, and care. Today, my guest is Ryan Johansen. Ryan worked in tech as a sales leader and is now helping managers become confident and effective leaders. In this conversation, Ryan will share his experience as a first-time leader, what led him to a burnout, his path to recovery, and finding joy again in his work. We also discuss about how to delegate and scale through your teams to achieve more. So, Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited because I think we are on a similar mission to help managers become great leaders. And I discovered you on LinkedIn. I think we were commenting on some posts from different influencers like Eric Partaker and others. So when I looked at your profile, I realized that we were on the same mission, and also reading a bit more about what you were posting and what you did. I found your free ebook, Stress in Tech: The First Time Manager Crisis, and one data that struck me at that time was this big thing, like 60% of new managers fail during the first 24 months of taking on the role. So I said, wow, that's I didn't realize that this was was going on. So I think I'd love to discuss that more with you, and also because of your tagline on LinkedIn. I mean, beat burnout, work smarter, take your life back. I think this is a very big topic for anybody in tech, but anybody in the leadership role as well, and at large. And wanted to hear about your story and lesson learned, and also how you help others grow and succeed in that transition from an IC role to a manager role, and discuss about burnout. I think it's a very important topic, which is quite hard to discuss sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
You need to demonstrate that vulnerability. It's not always easy for people to do that. I did record some months ago an episode with Steve Cuss. He was in the gaming industry, and he went through a difficult time as well, time of burnout, and he explained in very detail how he went back, and it was very inspiring. I got great feedback from that episode, and I'm looking forward to hearing about your experience and how you are helping others on becoming a leader and succeed in that role without experiencing that burnout. So that's pretty much some of the topics I wanted to address with you today.
Yeah, very excited to dive in, and thanks for having me.
Perfect. All right. So let's start with this statistics of the 60% of new managers failing during the first 24 months. Where do you think it happens? What's the problem that we have?
It's a lot of different problems. And I think what I've learned is that if anything, if you're listening to this or you're, hear the clip of this, like if you're struggling as a new manager, you are far from alone. I work with a lot of new leaders who that's one of the biggest takeaways they have is like it's good to not feel like I'm the only one who feel like I didn't get the instruction manual. So it's something that I have a very personal story with where I'll get into that a little bit later, but just for the overview of the topic, I set out a few months ago to interview a lot of leaders in tech and understand because I knew it wasn't just me. I had talked to once I opened up about my experience, I heard from a lot of other people that they have a tough time with it for a variety of different reasons. So I interviewed all these leaders to ask them, what are the three biggest issues that cause the most stress for first time managers? I had a hypothesis, which a lot of it was confirmed true, and I learned a lot of things along the way. And it came down to 9 different problems, which we can dive into the specifics of them, but it all boils down to a few different factors. So the first is how you make the transition of the role, some of the mental part. So it's how are you dealing with things like constant failure, giving up control, having your identity change overnight, going from being a top performing superstar, everything is perfect IC, to being brand new at a job where things go wrong all the time. The second is it's a big jump to go from just leading yourself to leading other people. So you can be very good at your job and then think, okay, people follow what I do, everything's going to go great. They'll do things the way I do. It's far from it. So I think the lack of soft skills and training around things like that tend to be the biggest difference maker. They get pushed aside and they're never prioritized. But that is, in my experience, that was the biggest difference maker. Once I started really digging in and working on that stuff, life got easier. My team liked me and we got a lot more accomplished. And then the last, I think, is you go from, even if it's an insane workload that you have already, you have a workload that just explodes. You have more responsibility. That it comes with the nature of the job. If you were handling one person's work yourself, now you're responsible for 6 people or 8 people, and there's a lot more visibility. People are bringing you problems. So it's how can you run your day effectively? How can you focus? So it comes down to like those prioritized things. And it's not, productivity is an important topic, but even more than that, it's how do you prioritize your workday? How do you get the right things done? Because if you're split in a million different directions and you're not comfortable having the conversations of, hey, look, you're a developer by nature. So the thing I always say to people is where, I come from more of the customer facing, where you're working with a lot of customers and they pull you in a bunch of different directions. You want to do a bunch of different things. And I compare it to, it's like telling an engineer to build part of 20 different products. Nothing gets done and you feel terrible about it too. So it's like having that discipline to focus on the right things. And it's not easy. It's completely against what everyone, wants, that quick, always on stuff. But taking a step back is important. So those are a few of the things. And, I think it's a tough time. I think, life can be difficult, but it seems just, with the nature of things you see on the news and, coming out of COVID and, we're always plugged into things. So there's societal issues on top of that, but it's challenging.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I've been in sales as well. I've been, pre-sales in tech.
Yeah.
So I've been also on the customer-facing side of things, and you are always, you have to deal with different conflicting priorities, trying to please customers and serve them as much as you can, but it's not always easy. So and certainly the dynamics of what's going on internally in the company also adds up to what you are facing, engaging with customers and all the constraints that you have. So I'd like to take a step back. I mean, thanks for sharing the 3 main issues that you have identified, and I will definitely put the link to your ebook where you are highlighting the 9 biggest problems that you have identified through your interviews with different leaders. But I wanted to take a step back and have a more personal take on your journey. So could you explain your journey? How did you transition, and what led you to the situation that you faced?
Yeah. So I will say that I always felt the need to prove myself. And a good way to do that, whether it was growing up, say it was with something like sports or anything. And when I got into work and just, the way I was raised, I think I started working when I was like 12 or 13. It was an important thing to both be successful and work hard. And it was very much ingrained in me and very ambitious. I was working at this startup and doing pretty well with it. And sooner or later, like they knew I wanted a management role. It's something that I had my sights set on because for a better reason, my intentions to get into it were, that's the next thing. And that's what society tells you should do. So I'll be totally transparent with, what I thought at the time. So my CEO pulls me aside during a company offsite and he says, Ryan, you're doing a great job and we want to promote you to a management role. And I felt like I had, conquered the world. I was on cloud nine. What I did was have the idea that, okay, I'm going to walk in there and I'm going to be friends with everyone. I'm going to tell them how I do things and, everything's going to go so perfect. And then I came in for the rude awakening, which, out of my own ignorance and let's call it optimism, it led me to, it's a challenging thing to deal with because there's all these things that you are frankly not prepared for. And a lot of people don't know what they're getting into with the job because it's at the end of the day, it's very much it's not about you anymore. It's about making sure that other people get the results. And I was very much also in one of those team lead type of roles where I was managing people, but I still had a ton on my plate too, which I'm very much against those roles in tech. I think it's a really common practice, but when kind of like that whole focus thing, I think it's helpful to groom people for a short amount of time. And that's essentially what it worked for me. But I think there's a dark side where, you're doing two jobs and you can feel like a failure because you're being spread too thin and you can't focus. But aside from that, what happened was we're in a company that we're doing okay. We had to be frank with you, I was in customer success. We had a pretty high churn rate and I took over and I took that very personally. And we had a very, very ambitious target for that year. And I couldn't imagine the thought of not having that target hit. So what I did was I ended up working insane hours. I was worried about things going wrong all the time. I took everything personally. I tried to control situations that I couldn't control, which that's a good recipe to make yourself more miserable. I end up not taking care of myself because I'm working so much. I start withdrawing from social activities. And on the outside, it looks like I have the job of my dreams. I have an amazing girlfriend. Everything's going for me. On the inside, I had always dealt with some mental health challenges of anxiety and depression, but was able to keep myself together. But this just got to a point where I'm not sleeping. I'm miserable. I'm having panic attacks all the time. And I do the very much American male thing of shove it down and, one day you'll die and it'll be over. And that didn't, like anything, I kept forcing it down. And then one day, it started to be a little bit too much. And I remember I even got to the point where I used to like to meditate. And I thought that was something really helpful. And I was struggling. I knew I had to change something. And I started looking up meditation retreats. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go to one of these things. Everything's going to be better. I'll be fixed. So our fiscal year ended the last week of January. So I was going to go away in February. And then middle of January, I walk in one day and I just have this massive panic attack that feels like nothing I've ever felt. And hopefully I never feel again. That it's like someone told me that everyone I loved had died. It was just like the worst feeling on earth. And I grabbed my boss as I was a mess and I told him, listen, I've been struggling for a long time. I don't know what I'm going to do. I need help. And something really amazing happened is he said, okay, there's nothing more important than you taking care of yourself. So we're going to survive. You're important, but take all the time you need and just focus on getting better, which that small moment that could have been handled in a lot of ways because very, very scary to admit stuff like that out loud, especially in a workplace. I already had a great relationship with this guy, but you talk about someone that you would do anything for now, and I'm having dinner with him next week. But like those, as a leader, that's just another kind of thing to take away. Is like those small moments can just change someone's life like you can't imagine. So I I stepped out of the work. I grabbed my stuff. I told them I'd be, I get in touch with them. I'd be back as soon as I could. I end up calling my therapist that I haven't talked to in months because I've been so busy with work. And he said, okay, why don't you try checking yourself into a hospital, which seemed like the worst thing in the world. And I felt like a failure. It was very much, it was just like, it was kind of the end of the road and it was rock bottom. And I was just absolutely devastated. And I walked in there and you play the waiting game, and then finally I end up in there, and immediately I want to get out of there. And they told me, listen, it's you don't seem like you're, a terrible threat, but still we have to keep you here until Tuesday because it's a long weekend. So I knew I'd be stuck there for 4 days, and I said, okay, I'll make the best of it. It's not my meditation retreat I was hoping for, but I'll get a little bit of a break from reality. So in there, you talk about just the lowest of lows and feeling bad for yourself and things like that. But two really important things happened there. One of them was there was another patient in there who he thought that I was a CIA spy that was spying on him. And it was kind of a comical thing, but it made me think of, okay, if his brain's telling him that story, maybe all the stuff I'm telling myself on a regular basis isn't rooted in reality either. And the other thing that happened is there was a poster of other people that have overcome mental health challenges, people like Winston Churchill, people like Abraham Lincoln. And I never knew they had that issue. And they went on to live pretty successful and important lives and do very good things. So those two things of, okay, maybe I shouldn't trust my brain like I have been. And maybe there's a way out and there's some hope and I can get better. So what I did was I got out and I started chasing, how can I get better with everything I had. I had to go back to work because I'm not independently wealthy. And I worked hard for that job. I still wanted that job and it was rewarding to me. But I knew if I kept doing what I was doing, I was a round trip thing. And I thought that's the last place I ever want to end up. So I knew that that's rubber meets the road. I start getting the professional help, which that's the number one thing in any recommendation, any scenario, that's what you want to do. All the other stuff is helpful, but it's always going to be number one because it's a very individual journey. I share a lot of tips and helpful things to do, but it's your own journey, and getting support from other people is the big thing. But as I was reading books and taking courses and talking to other people, I start to pick up things and I apply them. And what do you know? I start to be able to handle things better. I can deal with difficult situations. I can have more challenging conversations without taking it personally. Things can go wrong without me ruining my day over it. All of a sudden, the other thing I looked up a lot is how can I do more in less time? And then there's the productivity hacky school of it, where take your ice bath and your Pomodoro timer. But there's some stuff in there. But I think a few of the things that I was looking at it was more like, it's not about doing more stuff. It's about doing the right stuff in the right way. So removing distractions, because if you think of, we're constantly on our phones, tethered into devices, which are like email and things like that, which are anxiety machines. So making simple changes like that. So my life gets a lot better, still ups and downs. And I have this realization of okay, everything that I've learned has been so simple that I wish that someone had taught me this stuff and it would have saved me a lot of pain. And the other kind of part of that is I don't want people to go through what I went through. That's why I started doing this. So I was okay, I'll give it a shot. Let me see if people care about this. So first move is I reached out to someone in my network who they work for a company in customer success called Churn Zero. And I asked them hey, would you be open to doing a webinar on stress and customer success? And they're like, sure. And I had never done it before. Very I'm okay with presenting. I'm definitely not a professional speaker, as you can probably tell if you're listening to this. But what I did was just put together everything I had and try to organize it and just give a very vulnerable approach with what I went through, what it was like, and how I figured stuff out. And I was hoping a few people might show up, and then over 500 people showed up. So it's something where it's been
Wow.
a incredible journey, and I've been at it for a few years, and I just went full time a few weeks ago, where it's insane to go from rock bottom, thinking it's the end of the road, to literally working with people and organizations to show them that by putting your mental health first, A, you should do that, but B, there's a lot of like business benefits from it too. So it's been just, I get to work with people who come in rough shape, and then after a few weeks you get to see them smile again, and it's been just unreal.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I mean, it's a great story. There's a lot to unpack here, so that's quite impressive. What I think is, I mean, there were two turning points, as I think that you highlighted. One is acknowledging that something is wrong, and telling your boss that you need to take some time off, and your boss being comprehensive and supportive, and telling you, yeah, go and fix yourself, and then don't trust your brain. It's I think important to realize that there's a lot going on, and also I like the story about the posters of the Lincoln and Churchill, saying
Yeah,
that
yeah.
despite that situation, you can still be successful. So there's hope. There's yeah, you can recover from it, and you can become someone great. And I think it's about ownership, and taking ownership of your health, and taking ownership of your journey. So that's really cool. So can you can we dive a bit deeper into what happened leading to the burnout? I mean, when you were promoted as a team lead, as a coach player, as we say, also, where basically you do your job on top of managing others.
Yeah.
Did you get any training? Did you get any support in that transition, or you were left alone to figure it out?
Yeah, so we didn't do any formal training, and part of that was, I'm I'm sure you've probably heard of the Dunning Kruger effect, where your ability you think your ability is high, and then as you go along, you realize that you know nothing, and it's a disaster, and then slowly over time you get there. But that was that personified, but essentially they like, and I think it's a common issue that came up in a lot of these interviews is people promote the people that do very good at the job, that are, the folks that can figure it out, that work hard, that get stuff done. And with good intention, they think, okay, this person can figure it out. I believe in them. They're great. But fail to, okay, like they're probably going to need a little bit more. So, it's also 100-person company, moving really quick, tons of things to do. So it's not like I sit back and say like, oh, they tried to ruin me or something like that. It's something where a little bit of preventative measure, not only, would it have saved me from that situation? I don't know. Like, I'm not putting that on training or anything like that, but I ended up taking on my own I think it was maybe like a 2 or 3 hour lecture based training it was terrible. Like all I could think of is like, I really don't know what I'm doing, and I think I could do a little bit better here, but that is what it is. So I think what I ended up doing was, I've always been a big reader, and the other thing too is, like, I started reading, but the thing that made the biggest difference is, for the longest time, and this probably led me to ending up in the hospital, is not asking people for help, and thinking it's a sign of weakness, and thinking, oh, if I ask them for help, they're going to know that I can't handle this job. And it's that kind of story that's in your head. When in actuality, I learned that I talked to my boss, and he's like, yeah, I'm having a hard time too, or I've gone through this. So like I had I rolled up to two different leaders who I still have amazing relationships with too. I think the world of these guys. And like the more I just asked them for help, I would get the help. So, it's really terrifying. And I know not everyone has that relationship where you can feel comfortable with your boss, you can trust your boss. But like, I'd say one thing where like is getting some type of mentorship, whether that's reaching out to some random person on LinkedIn and hoping the best. There's good strategies there, but talking to someone that has seen it before is just such a massive difference maker.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Mhm.
I in the previous episode that I recorded with a director at Amazon, so she has a huge team. We discussed about the fact that being a leader is lonely, but it doesn't have to be.
Mhm.
And that's something also I experienced myself. I think there's a combination of different things that you alluded to, like you know you don't want to. I mean, you need to demonstrate that vulnerability. So,
Mhm.
and it's not easy, specifically for males.
Mhm.
It's a common trait of our gender, I would say. But also, I think there's a kind of a competition, and you don't want to, and specifically in sales. I think
Yeah.
between leaders, there's always competition. You want to be the best, and you want to have the best performing teams, and demonstrating that vulnerability is not easy because you compare yourself to the others, and you don't want to lose against your
Mhm.
peers, which is a very terrible idea. But that's how many people I would say behave and process. So one other thing that I found super interesting and is the concept of sparring partners, where you can expect from the other, you can learn from each other, you can grow together
Yeah.
by sharing your
Mhm.
struggles and also getting feedback. I
Mhm.
think, but again, it means that from this top layer that you are as an IC and you are performing super well independently,
Mhm.
you need to learn how to demonstrate that vulnerability because you don't know.
Yeah, and I love that concept of having an accountability partner, and that's something that I run this like leadership training program called the Human Leadership Accelerator, and that's one of the main things that we have is like you get an accountability partner to hold like, and it's not just hey, are you paying attention? It's more of like I'm going through this situation, like how would you handle it? And it's a few things, but and this it doesn't I don't care how you do it like there's a million different ways to make this happen, but the power in there is it's always easier to give advice than take advice. And the reason for that is you have objectivity from the situation. You're not emotionally connected to the outcome. So by asking for help from someone else, you're immediately going to either get a more neutral perspective where they can come up with some ideas or they've been through that situation before. So more often than not that you might get at least someone to listen to you. It doesn't, maybe you're not, you just want to vent or something like that. But more often than not, you'll either get someone that's been through it before, or they might have a more neutral view and that they're able to think through ideas because they're not, when you're under that fear or pressure of things going wrong, it can really put you in a state where you're not thinking clearly and creates a lot of challenges.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have any tips on how to find those partners?
Yeah. I think with like in your own company is like reach out to other people. And this is something that it depends on the size of your organization. So I've worked for, very large companies and smaller ones, but I would say try to find other peers, maybe in your own type of, it doesn't have to be your own like line of business or something. Like I was in customer success. It doesn't like I was the only customer success person, but by talking to our head of product, like not only is that good for me to understand how they're doing things, but like it also helps me understand like how they work, what they're looking for, and I can find more wins. So not only is it like it's going to help you get through the day better and you'll get more support as a leader and learn faster, but also you're going to be much more valuable to the organization because you're more networked, you're plugged in. And I'm pretty introverted guy. Like I like my own company, but that's one thing I've always tried to focus on in any place. It's just, it's not I think I hate to say it, but like it's not always like what it's who you know. So just like having those connections and knowing like what people are looking for, because if you can play that position where, oh, you're working on this project, well, that's something that this person's interested in too. Let me make a connection for you. So, and it's feels good to help people with stuff like that too.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I like that. I recently discovered there's a subreddit on about leadership where actually many people are asking those questions. So looking for, many leaders actually are asking very important, deep questions about they have a situation, not disclosing any personal information, private information,
Mhm.
or anything. But I found that through that anonymity that you get on social media, like Reddit, they can get help, and I think it's a good way for some people, because if within your company, it's a small company, you don't feel that you can find those resources or
Mhm.
partners. I think it's another good way of finding someone that can help you and get some answers as well.
Yeah, I was like the king of Googling things with stuff like that. Of, hey, how do I, like, my most probably search term leading up to the hospitalization was like, am I burnt out? But
Oh yeah.
like, it's nothing where just, it's so helpful to get that. I love the Reddit idea too. And I've definitely done that with a couple of things. I don't think I've ever asked a question on it, but just like you can learn anything from other people and you take it for, with a grain of salt like anything else, but it's a good helpful thing to start out with. And if anything, it makes you realize you're not the only one dealing with it.
So we talk about the what led to the burnout and everything that you had to address. Would you? I didn't understood whether you. I didn't understand whether you came back to work and took over back your job, or because you explained
Oh yeah, yeah.
exactly what happened, but I'm curious to understand what happened after the hospital and therapy and all the readings that you did. So
Oh yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, so I was in there Thursday. I got out Tuesday morning. I think I stayed out the rest of the week, just to kind of do some deep thinking. But no, I went right back to work. And yeah, it wasn't like I was off sitting in the library. Like, I went right back into it. So like very much, it wasn't this like, and I wasn't all better. It was far from fixing me, but like, I was probably just as worse off. And it was like, walking back to that was insanely hard. I thought about leaving, in great detail, but for some reason I had worked really hard for that and felt like I had kind of like finally reap the reward for a lot of hard work. So I was very hesitant to like walk away from that. So that's another like kind of efficiency thing, if you will. Like I made sure that like I was working, getting everything done I needed to, but like if I had to go like to a therapy appointment, I would do that. I would start to like, that's another thing that like is critical, is like being okay with setting boundaries of like, okay, like my calendar's blocked off for this time. And like work was good about it, where like I didn't have to go back and like people weren't asking me questions. I was petrified of like what people would think, and then got to a point where I don't care anymore. But that wasn't easy. But it's a situation where like I was just, either if I wasn't working, I was just trying to take care of myself and exercise and do all that good stuff and read too. But And I think the good part about it is like as you start to, and it takes time. I had really low energy. It was a rough ride for a really long time. But I think it took
How
about
long?
probably a year to get to a good enough spot where I think that's about the point where I was like, okay, like this stuff has helped me. And that's when the kind of ideas started to percolate of like, maybe this is something I can help other people with, because that's another thing. By like, I largely attribute my mental health getting better than it's ever been by like, I am constantly learning about this stuff and talking to other, and like the best way to learn is to teach. And I'm constantly reminded of like, hey, if I take my eye off the ball and I'm not taking care of myself, like I know what's going to happen. So that's, what happened.
Perfect. So basically, you went back to work. You put some guardrails. You
Yeah.
you you protected your calendar so you could go to the therapy because you needed it. You had some time to. You blocked your calendar. You said that. Did you? I think one of the challenge that we have, and that's true for everyone in being ICs or in leadership position, but probably more in leadership position, is that we don't have enough time to think, and that's why I'm trying to get in my agenda as well. I'm blocking time in my agenda just to think, not to do, but to think.
Oh, 100%. And that's one thing that I always talk about. And it's the number one thing I recommend. I teach things around like how do you manage stress at work? How do you be more productive? And the twofold answer to that, if you can do one simple thing, is waiting to check your email instead of hopping on it first thing in the morning. Is like, I went up to my boss and I was like, he's an open-minded guy. He knows I care. He knows I work hard, all that stuff. And I was like, okay, I've been reading this book called Deep Work. And in it, they talk about like how to focus. And like one of the things they talk about is like not being completely available all the time. Cause that's one thing as soon as my eyes are open, that email is getting refreshed. And then I'd be in a terrible mood before I even got out of bed. So with the email thing, I told him, I was like, listen, I want to wait the first hour of the day. I'll give people my phone number if they need to get in touch with me. Like if any emergencies happen, like please reach out to me. But like, do you mind if I try this for a week? And he's like, go ahead. I don't like, that's fine. I trust you. And that's something where I've still pretty much do things happen where, like it's human psychology. Once in a while, I break the habit or something like that. But instead of hopping into email, where I think the dangers of that is it sets you up for distraction right away where you're not focused on what you have to do. It also makes you reactive. So you're just responding to things instead of focusing on what's important to you. And then I think it just, like I said, you could look at that before you get out of bed and you're miserable to start the day. So instead, I just picked out what's my one thing or like top 3 things I want to do. And I would do that in the morning and I would feel better. I'd feel like I was accomplishing something. And then typically the rest of my day was responding to customers or my team and like the world was on fire, but like I got something done. So it was just like the thinking part is so true though, because if you think about it, a lot of people, they are just have some type of device or information coming into their brains at every given moment of the day. And that's something where like one of my favorite things to do, and if I'm struggling with a problem or thinking through or trying to figure something out, going for a 20-minute walk without my phone and just thinking about it, like it's where my best ideas have ever come. Every single big breakthrough I've ever had was just walking around my neighborhood.
I do that as well. It's good
Huge
for health. It's good for
for a lot of reasons. Yeah, it's just
reasons. Yeah.
It's the simple things. Like everyone wants these sexy hacks, but it's not the sexy. It's the simple stuff that does the biggest difference.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so you put those guardrails. You created those habits of protecting your time, so you could identify the key things you want to achieve in a day, and then yes, of course, you would respond to emails afterwards. But at least you have this time that you can use to deliver things that matters, that are important. So you have
Yeah.
also this sense of achievement and fulfilling, that everyone needs. You want to be, as I said, I mean, you don't want to feel miserable because there will be always a ton more things to do.
Yeah.
And with Slack and Teams and the like of the chat and plus emails, plus meetings, plus calls, I think it's never ending.
No. And that was another funny kind of thing that gave me a lesson that I didn't expect it from, is the show Seinfeld, where having a night where like I was always trying to like, why can't I finish my to-do list? And it like I was chasing this dragon that I would never hit. And one day I'm watching Seinfeld and there's an episode where they ask Newman, who's Jerry's neighbor, who's a mail carrier, why do postal workers go crazy? And he like snaps and he's like, because the mail never stops coming. And it's just a funny thing, but it reminded me of like, okay, like the work is never going to stop. And like, I need to be okay with getting the right things done, because I'm chasing after, when you're chasing a target, you can never hit. Like that's just a recipe for misery.
Yeah. Agree. So that's, I think, brings us to the topic of the importance of focus as a leader. That's a topic that I wanted to touch upon. So, with so many things to do, I mean, as a leader, you put yourself, a lot of pressure, and there are many tasks that are needed. You need to do some reporting to your line of business. You need to you are a people manager, so you need to also to take care of your teams. You need to understand what the achievements. So you need to understand also what's the vision for the team, and how you making progress. What is blocking? Do you need to do some performance management? So how do you get focus when you are in a leadership position? What are some of the tips you are teaching to your students?
Yeah. So I like, one of the things which you wouldn't expect is to throw out the idea. We were just kind of talking about this theme, but like throw out that productivity zen, or where everything goes perfect, because it's not going to happen. Because you're going to frustrate yourself if you're trying to have these like, I'm going to perfectly schedule my week, and you need to really get clear on like what are the really important things that make the biggest difference. So I'd say there's a few different steps that you can take. So the first I'd start out with is, and this is almost a psychological reason as well, is if you keep everything in your head, there's no way to discern what's important, and it feels overwhelming. So that's when I talked about objectivity earlier. That's a thing that I like largely talk about the benefits of. So a good way to do that is just you start out and you write down everything you got to do. And this is a really helpful exercise that I work with a lot of people on. It's just like, okay, put every single activity that you do in a week. And it's not like, oh, I have to build this. It's more of like, where does your week go? Because unless you do like, it's an inventory to understand like, what are you doing? And after you do that, you look at the task list and you're like, okay, what is something that I'm doing that's absolutely transformational, that like makes a biggest difference to our company's largest goal, our largest goal. And then the other part is like, what's transactional? What's things that I'm doing to keep the lights on that are kind of important, but potentially maybe other people can help there. And I think one of the biggest missteps a new leader makes, that I definitely did too, is suddenly you have other people that are controlling your destiny, and you're afraid to delegate things for good reason, because maybe you're thinking it'll just take me a minute. Well, if you think about like, if you're trying to grow in your career, you run the risk of you're going to work your way into being stuck in that middle management role, or you're so valuable that everything has to go through you, and your team's delayed, and they either feel like you're overwhelming them or micromanaging them, or you're not using it. So there's a lot of issues that come with that. So when you have that list of tasks, it's like figuring out, okay, which one of these could I have other people look at? And that's so the next thing that they run into is they're afraid, like, okay, I don't know, like I feel bad about delegating, or think about it in the wrong way. Is like you hand off your work and you're going to go sit in a hammock, and that's what people are going to think of you. And in reality, you're delegating some stuff to free up your time to do other things that have more of a strategic impact, or they're just different things. Because if you keep holding on to that smaller things, that's where you're going to stay. And then I think, like, as far as really effective ways to get better at that, so you have we just talked about getting a clear list, understanding what you can delegate, getting more comfortable with the thought about delegating. The next challenge that I think a lot of people run into is delegating the wrong things to the wrong people, because that comes from a lack of, like, another misstep that I probably made, to be honest with you, and I think a lot of other people do, is not taking that upfront time to understand your team, and doing that discovery of what do you like to do, what are your goals, what are your strengths, where do you want to go. The other level you can do on top of that is understanding things like disc profiling, which that's like you can read a book, Surrounded by Idiots. That's just a helpful guide to understand, like, is this person much more analytical? Are they going to be happy with spreadsheets? Or are they going to cry? And that's like a whole other thing for management. Like, I think that knowing your people and, like, what's going to make them miserable versus engaged on a personality and, like, an interest level is so important. But on the delegation piece, one task can be heaven or hell for the same, like, for different people. So, like, knowing, okay, you have this list now. And a good example that I use is, like, I didn't, like, have good ideas for doing, like, team building things or, like, training. So, like, if you just tap someone on the shoulder to be like, hey, you know what, you're really good at doing this, and I'd love to have you teach the rest of the team how you do this process. In that, instead of you trying to run things, which, guess what, your team's sick of hearing you and they're not engaged. Typically, I realized that after a few of those meetings, even as smart as I think I am sometimes, and as much as I like to teach, they get tired of the same voice. So instead of me having to put stuff together, now we have someone that's empowered, that's even better than I am at something, and they're teaching the rest of the team. So that's another thing where, like, find someone where, like, and that's not going to happen. You have, like, sometimes you have things that just have to get done, and that's what it is. But, like, there's really good opportunities you can find to, like, set your team up to win and make them happier and more engaged, just by letting stuff go.
I like that. Yeah. That's it's very powerful. Mm-hmm. And also it gives, I think it's important for the person, so they can demonstrate their mastery and get some feedback from others, mm-hmm. so that put them in a situation of success, and then that also fosters, I think, the work between different individual contributors, because then not everything has to go through you, but people can really have peers and work together, learn from each other. So I like that. Delegation is hard. That's and specifically when you step into a major role where you used to be the one very successful and in the situation. So delegation is definitely something that I had a hard time to do, but and I think I'm getting much better at it after more than 10 years now. But there's one thing that one of my mentor told me once, is that that's what his mentor told him as well, was the fact that don't come to me when your plate is full. Come to me when your plate is half full and you have time to take on more responsibilities and more stuff. Mm-hmm. And I found that this simple sentence was so powerful, because as managers, we tend to take on more and more stuff and more responsibilities and more stuff, which leads to situations like burnouts, for sure. Mm-hmm. But you are not in a situation where you can actually grow, because you are not empowering others to deliver on your behalf, and you are not learning to scale through others, which is a very important topic. So this I think is super powerful to remind ourselves that you should have time to go to the hammock, as you said, and and let people do the stuff. So you empower them. So you can take on more of the more activities, more strategic work, because that's why you were put in the leadership position in the first place.
Yeah, or it helps you spend more time with your team. Like that's another way to think about it. But like when you talked about like that setting up the team to succeed, another thing is that I really fell in the trap of is maybe it was my ego, or like I like to help people. So like that's something where like, you know, it's probably a reason why I got into like teaching people. It's something that like I genuinely enjoy, absolutely love. But if someone keeps coming to you for questions, and like my first instinct was always, oh, you can do it by this, and let me show you. And like I got so excited, where yes, they'd probably learn, and like people were able to pick up. But if I could bite my tongue instead, and like the shift that I wish someone else taught me was like, it's going to be much better for you to help that person, to guide that person to the answer and help them to think about it, than for you to just give them the answers to the test, because you're essentially helping them learn these things and come to their own conclusions. And it's like, it's not by, well, what do you think we should do? It's asking those like Socratic questions of, okay, like how have you handled things like this in the past? And then not only does that help them, but like in that moment, you also understand like, okay, this is how this person thinks a little bit better. So you understand them a little bit more, and that can help you out. So it's something where like the questions can be so helpful to like just have people like empower them to like figure things out on their own. And then, hey, you know, still I'll support you to the end of the earth, but like I need to not jump in and try and solve everything for you, because it's not, it's going to stunt your development as well.
Yeah, it's such a common theme on Reddit, on the leadership subreddit. There are so many questions. Say, yeah, I've been helping this individual, and they keep coming back with questions and stuff. Say, and you are doing the work for them. You are giving the answers. So that's why, I mean, it's easier for them to get back to you and say, hey, okay, they will help me. And that's not a good way to scale yourself, for sure.
Yeah, and it's not a malicious thing either. Usually it's just you're training your team to, you know, be dependent on you, which you don't want them to.
Yeah.
I think I heard that from a mentor, is like, you're always trying to work yourself out of a job. So the less people need you, the better, which that's a scary thing for your ego sometimes, is you want to be valued and be the expert, but it's about them, not you.
Yeah, that's right. My boss is saying something like this. He's often telling me, make me redundant. Your job is to make me redundant.
Yeah.
So, okay. All right. There was one topic I was curious to discuss with you on the importance of consultative leadership, meeting people where they are. So, can we talk about it?
Yeah, so that's one that like just kind of hit on a little bit with like getting the questions. So I like to think about this in a few different things. So I think it's helpful for delegating, where, you know, like you understand your team more, you're able to hand off the right task. That's one place where it's important. Another one specifically, like I talked about, is that team training, where instead of you running the show every single week and, you know, boring your team and they're, you know, not paying attention, you set someone else up to succeed and have them do it. I think the most critical aspect to put it in is feedback, because it's so important to have a tailored consultative approach to difficult situations or anything like that. Because like going back on that vein of giving the people the answer, is say you're on I use this example in trainings all the time, but like I come from the customer success thing, but you know, let's imagine that someone on your team invites you to a call with a pretty big customer that's a quarterly review. And the call just goes nightmare. They are furious. They say that they feel disrespected by how poorly the call went. A newer manager or someone, because they're so burnt out or in at their rope, they might say, how can you let this happen? You need to do X, Y, and Z, blah, 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 blah. Where, like, if you think of giving someone feedback in that moment, they're already miserable because, like, that's a really low point for them. So you're kicking them when they're down, even though, like, that's your like, you don't mean to do that. You're upset too. And they typically know what went wrong. So, like, in giving them all the next steps, they're not going to be as receptive to hearing that. And it's just human nature. You're not, you're afraid, you're miserable, you're trying to protect yourself. You're less open to new ideas. Where instead, if you were to just take a pause, it's not easy. Trust me. Like, this is something that it's a skill you build over time, but to say something like, okay, that went off the rails. Like, we'll figure it out. Like, like, are you okay? But then you want to say, like, okay, where do you think that started going off the rails? Or what do you think we could have done differently there? Because that's going to help them think of what they could do differently. Because instead of you just telling it, it's the same thing. Like, you're helping them guide the answer, which there's definitely situations where, like, if that's, the 10th time that's happened, that's a much different conversation as a leader. But, like, in those pivotal moments of feedback, like, say that's the first time it happened, or, the second or something like that. Now that person looks at you as like, okay, this person actually cares about me and they, like, gave me a break and they want me to grow. More often than not, that person's going to show up for you more. They're going to trust you. So it's like those moments where, like, that can go one way or the other. We're like, okay, this guy doesn't care about me. He's a jerk, because they're already down, and they'll just take their frustration and point it your way, fairly or unfairly. But just taking that minute to be like, okay, like, let's try and solve this together. And how could you do this a little bit differently? And hey, after this, why don't you come up with a plan and we'll walk through it and then try and correct it that way. So that's, like, I wish someone had showed me that, because there's, like, for kind of dumb reasons, like, there's still things where I wish I could have it a different way, because, like, maybe I still obsess over, like, I yelled at someone or something went wrong or things like that. Because if you screw up as an individual contributor, you delete something, you lose a sale, whatever, like, the world goes on more often than not. But, like, as you screw up as a manager, like, that's someone's lives, or that could ruin their day, or, like, maybe they think about you differently. So it's something where it's a huge responsibility, and that probably adds to the tremendous stress and the burnout and all these kind of miserable things that can happen to you. So it's enough of a rant, but I think it's just such, like, I wish someone had taught me that stuff.
Yeah, I agree. It's difficult. It's always, specifically if you're in your nature, you are a helper. You want to, give the answers because But I like the consultative approach also, because that helps them to own. I think putting back the ownership into the IC hands, I think it's the most powerful thing, because this is how they are going to learn, this is how they are going to grow, and just helping them to, as you said, the Socratic way of giving birth to those ideas, and so maiotica, as they call it. So basically, helping them to surface what they know already, or
yeah.
But in a way it's not you saying anything. It's just them saying, oh yeah, probably I should have done this. And that's really powerful.
Yeah. And I had a boss who was good about that. He knew that, like, I was so critical of myself, like, in unhealthy ways, obviously, where, like, he knew that would just make things 10 times worse. Where, like, no one's going to, I was like, trust me, no one's more annoyed about this than me. So, like, you saying something isn't going to, like, talk to me tomorrow and we'll go through it. But yeah, it's just, and that's another, like, you got to know someone's personality, and that makes it a little bit easier. And yeah, it's just such a helpful approach.
Yeah, that's correct. There's a big topic also in tech, but also in other fields. But let's talk about tech for a second. Imposter syndrome. I think with social media, with LinkedIn, with Twitter, Everyone
Why?
is, experiencing that. And when you are a new manager, a leader, it's getting even worse, I would say. So, what's your experience with that?
Yeah, it's massive, and definitely dealt with this on my own. And it's something where it's typically one of the first things I talk about when I kick off a program, where that's where everyone's at, and just addressing it, because there's different ways to think about it. But let's go into the first part you talked about with the LinkedIn, the social media. Everyone shows this highlight reel of their lives, and it's easy to think that like everyone else has it figured out but me, when typically like it's just this form of, they're showing their best self. And so the saying that I love and I say all the time is, don't compare your insides to someone else's outsides, where you don't know what that person's going through. It might seem like certain people have everything in the world going for them and you're doing something wrong. Because you're measuring yourself unfairly, first of all. But you want to think of, I forget the exact name of the graph, but I have it in a presentation. But everyone has all these different dimensions in their life, where like if you think of a video game, like, and you build a character, you can give them like certain amounts of everything. So you're comparing maybe like your height to them. It's just such an uneven way to measure things. So like that's just one of the quick things to think of before. But as a leader dealing with imposter syndrome, or like, I obviously have massive imposter syndrome, like starting this business of like, who the heck's going to listen to me? And like, even still, but here's a few of the things that like I go through with people is like, I usually, if someone volunteers, I'll talk through and be like, okay, well, like, tell me about this, your management job. Like, when did you get promoted? And they'll say when they got promoted. And I'm like, okay, like, tell me about how that went. And they'll be like, well, this person, they promoted me. And I was like, okay, so first of all, another human being believed in you to do this job, right? Like, oh yeah, that's kind of a good point. And then the next part from there is like, okay, like, what are some of the good things you've done over the past few months? Or like, what are some of your wins? And then they'll go through that. So it's like, okay, so it actually sounds like you're kind of crushing it right now and you're doing a really good job. You're like, oh yeah, that kind of is true. And this isn't, I'm not some, Dr. Phil. It's just, you're getting objectivity. You're having another person say it out loud. Because it's just kind of common exercises. And the third part I talk about is like, okay, well, write out your win. I'm trying to think of the other parts of that question, but like, so we have them get a bunch of like, write out your wins, get your data. Oh, and then the third part I asked them is, okay, so I want you to think of the job you had before you got promoted. And they say, okay. And I'm like, how did you feel going into that? They're like, oh, I was nervous. I had all these different things to do. I didn't think I'd be able to do it. And I'm like, you figured it out and you actually got promoted, right? They're like, yeah. So the only reason I've been able to figure that out and like put that whole framework together is like, that is how I keep myself grounded, of like other, like, and I'll break the fourth wall. Like if I'll still put together trainings and be like, this is terrible, this is horrible. And then it goes fine, but it's my own inner critic. So it's something where the first thing you do is understand that, like, get some social proof. Other people believe in you. That's your first box to check that might make you feel a little bit better. The second is collecting data points of like, what are some wins you've had? Because best believe there's things that are going to go wrong. And the third, I think, is the most important, where like, trust your ability to figure things out, because it's not about knowing everything. It's about knowing how to figure things out. And that's the important part. Like, nobody has all the answers. And then when I did these interviews, like, I had my suspicions, but it came up in almost every interview where like, I know people that are wildly successful at like huge companies that still, like, everyone feels the same way and everyone's trying to figure it out and do their best. And so like, it's a human experience. So, and the other thing is, if you like don't have imposter syndrome, then you're kind of in like, you're an arrogant person, and you're probably wrong about a lot of things too. So like that's the alternative. So you can't get rid of imposter syndrome. But you can quiet it down by doing things like learning to quiet that inner critic with things like, there's a lot of like cognitive behavioral therapy tricks that I'll share with people of like, how do you notice those unhelpful thought patterns? How do you understand where it's coming from? How do you rewire it so you're dealing with it in a more healthy way? But it's like imposter syndrome hates data. Just like writing that stuff out. That's how you get over it. And it's not going away. It's just you got to live to work with it and turn the radio down on it a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. And I found that a lot of people that are lacking some confidence, self-confidence, are also tricked by their own brain and memory,
Mm-hmm.
where they really focus on what went wrong, and they just forget about what went right. And that might be one of the root cause why some demographics are less not lucky, but less likely to be promoted, because they focus on what was wrong, and they are not telling a story and themselves a story that what went right. And so one of the things that I've been doing with my team is that I ask them to write an achievement log. So every time they do something good, and there are different criteria, different categories, but I want them to build that muscle, that memory of things that they achieved, and yeah, what went wrong and what they learned also, because I think that's super valuable. But that also help them to be promoted, because then I can look at these achievement logs, and yeah, they've taken on more and more bigger stuff, and now the scope is big enough. They are at next level. They are already demonstrating they can operate at next level, and everything is written, so that gives them also the self-confidence that they can get it. So I think it's quite useful
Yeah,
for
that's
everyone.
tapping into like positive psychology and gratitude, where like just the way that the mind works, it's trained to notice the negative because it's a way to protect us from danger. So that evolves where you have things like cognitive distortions, where uh, like filtering is when you only notice the bad things that happen, and what you're doing with that exercise, which is I've heard of it, a gratitude list or like 3 good things, and what you do with something like that is you rewire your brain over time, and it's recommended by like the Mayo Clinic and all these other like health institutions. It's one of the most time bang for your buck activities you can do, of like 5 minutes a day. You're training your brain to notice the positive in life, and it works much like if you've ever noticed a car that you want to buy and then you go out and you see that car everywhere. Like that, it's
Yeah,
doing the same exact thing with your brain. So there's just tremendous power in that exercise. So it's awesome that you're having your team do that. It's a huge idea. It's great.
I love the analogy. I will
Right?
reuse that
Yeah.
one with the car. That's so true. I
Yeah.
mean, every time you
Yeah.
say, "Oh, yeah, what about this car?" and then suddenly you see a lot of them in the street.
Yeah.
They were
Mhm.
just there, but you didn't notice. So that's really cool. I
Yeah.
like that. All right. Um, I wanted you to end on a very positive note, because I think we have talked a lot about the negative things as well, like this, and what went wrong, and how difficult it might be, or it is actually, to be a leader. But I wanted to hear from you some memorable moments as a leader, something that you are very proud. Um, in your career as a leader, and so if you have any examples to share with us.
Yeah. So there's a few. And like we just talked about it, I can occasionally be kind of like the doctor that smokes. Like I'm not always good at noticing some of the positive things that I do, and it's something I like. I only feel like I'm good at this stuff because I have to practice it to be able to do it. So like I definitely I practice these things, but a few that come to mind are the first person I ever managed. We had sometimes a contentious relationship because I'm very stubborn. And there was things where like we could get into it sometimes, and that like there's one time I like didn't handle something in a very good way, and like and she ended up getting promoted. Like that was a win. That like she did amazing at her job. Like so we just had disagreements over like how to do certain things, but is what it is. I like, so it was like the first time I ever managed. I had no idea what the hell I was doing, but like I still take that personally and beat myself up for it. But we were at a company offsite or something like our kickoff, and it was a little while after she had been in that role for about a year, and she like came over to me and she's like, hey, like, I just want to compliment you that you've like, I don't know exactly what you've done, but like I just noticed such a big difference in you, and like it seems like you've done such a good job and like gotten so much better at this. So to get someone like that wins over is a huge moment. And then I think just some of the other things is like it's all about seeing other people do well. And I think one of the things is like still having. I think that like I'm not proud of like we we hit our like a very very difficult company goal, and this is a thing where like I felt good about that for, I'm going to be honest with you, 5 minutes, and then I felt empty because that's something where it's an extrinsic motivation. What really got me going as a leader when I feel like it started to click was like just having better relationships with people, and like it's when I talk to those people that worked for me and catch up with them, and like just like feeling the connection. So it's honestly been much more. I don't really care about like there's been accolades and stuff like that, but it's more of like making an impact on someone or helping someone out. That's been the bigger thing, believe it or not.
Cool. I like
Yeah.
that. I like that. All right, so we are heading towards the end of the episode. So I'm going to ask my usual questions. So, how do you keep learning and growing as a leader? I think you mentioned several times reading stuff, but
Yeah, I think got really good advice from my uncle, which isn't about leadership, but I graduated college and he told me, learn how to learn. That's the most important skill you can have. You can learn, you can do anything. So I think it came down to like just, you got to have curiosity, and it maybe I don't know, like I definitely have a growth mindset, I'd say, where like I believe you can learn how to do anything, but I don't know if that's something where like some people, have it, some people might not, but um, I think even more than like the learning part or like the growing part is just like have the self-awareness to know that like you have a lot to figure out. Um, and like the Dunning-Kruger effect was definitely something that like most people don't come to me for help until they're a few months into management. No one ever comes exactly when they get started because they think they have everything figured out. Like I probably would have too. But I think the thing that you got to remember is like like Tiger Woods still takes golf lessons, or like every like great still practices and gets better. So it's a combination of knowing that like you're not perfect. You still have a ways to learn. It's a craft that you're constantly learning and improving. And in my learning, it's just a curiosity thing. I think it's very much of like you gotta keep your brain sharp or something like that, or else the way my mind works, it's probably not going to go in a good direction. It's probably a practical thing of just keeping it busy with good information, which I think probably helps me out a bit.
all right. Cool. Thank you. How can people hire your services? Because you are a trainer now. So
Yeah, so I do a few different things. So I do a 4-week program for companies called Stress Less and Get More Done that walks through my story, but also like the 4 main themes of how you can go from like companies probably bring me in when like they might be having a difficult time, where they acknowledge that burnout is a real thing, and we want our employees to not only be handle that, but hey, we still have big targets to hit. So I cover basically how to handle stress, how to work in a more efficient way, how to build healthier relationships and have difficult conversations. And then the final week, we talk about how do you do it on a consistent level? How do you work with yourself? How do you create good habits? So that's something that I'll go out and do that with companies. And then I also run that as a cohort program where I kick it off every month, and I have people from all over the world hop on and get to know me and get to know each other as a group. It's kind of a cool community. And then the other program I do is called the Human Leadership Accelerator. And that is an 8-week program that walks through, it reverse engineers those 9 challenges that I found. And it's a pretty small, intimate group talking through those challenges. There's a lot of obviously like content discussed, but then we go through like very practical things of what people are talking with. And that's been, they're both insanely rewarding to see people go from like struggling to like just feeling better and being more confident and things like that. So I have a website that is probably the best way to get in touch with me.
Okay, perfect. I will put that in the
Yeah.
show notes for sure. Do you have any book to recommend, or something that you found so good that you?
Oh, so many. I have an insane library. So I'll give a couple. I would say Deep Work's probably my favorite book of all time. I think I've read it a few times now. That's rethinking productivity, being tied into your phone all the time, pretty practical things. Makes a very good argument and practical steps to do it. Second one is a book called Essentialism. It's by a gentleman named Greg McCann. That is almost like applying minimalism at work. So it's a lot of us are in this trap of, I want to be successful. I have to work as much as possible. I have to say yes to everything. I have to do everything. It's not the case at all. And it's very much about like focusing on the right things. And it's a fantastic quick read. As far as, let me think through, for the stress stuff or some of like the mental parts of it, The Upside of Stress is a pretty good one. It's by Dr. Kelly McGonigal, and that talks about how to view stress in a different way, where we tend to have a more negative connotation to it because it's uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And then another one more on those like difficult thoughts or challenges, a book called The Happiness Trap. And that's more about like, how do you handle difficult thoughts? And then I'll throw in two more.
Wow. Okay.
One is Crucial Conversations.
Yes.
And that is how to have difficult conversations at work. That's a no-brainer. Read that if you're a leader. And the last one I talked about earlier is Surrounded by Idiots. And that one it talks about those 4 personality types. The stuff, it's a pseudoscience. Don't take it to heart. And they do a good job of like giving you the guardrails. But that will help you understand people better. And that'll make a huge difference for you. So, and if people want more topics, just let me know. I always have a few books cracked at all times.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thanks. Mm-hmm. Awesome. And last question before I'll let you go.
Yeah.
What other leaders should I interview next? Who would you recommend?
Ooh.
That you can introduce me to.
Let me think. Probably my old leader, Randy LeBlanc, who he is like would probably be a very interesting person to talk to. He's run very large teams, comes from more of a computer science background, very, very well-spoken, good at pre-sales, master of dad jokes, like very, very good guy. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. It was a great conversation. I really enjoyed that, and a lot of great learnings. So I'm really thrilled to share that with the rest of the audience. And thanks again.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure, and always love talking about this. And thanks for making this conversation important. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You stayed until the end. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Paid Forward Society. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share it with at least 2 people who would benefit from this discussion. Your support helps me reach more people and make a greater impact. You can also help me get discovered by leaving a 5-star rating and a review on your favorite podcast platform. I appreciate your support and look forward to continuing this journey with you. Bye.